There's a lot going on in the world right now. I feel like the news is like dropping into the iciest refrozen mogul field. We're left with bad news, but never any way to understand why something has happened or how we can have an impact. Once a month, we're going to follow up on the headlines that momentarily captivated our outdoor community, but the rest of the media was too busy to follow up on. Our new series, And Then What, runs after the show across all episodes for about a month. Tune in or not, but it's here if you need it. The Diaries is supported by never quitting on a bad day. Remember that time when you helped us carry out a dying man's wish and got Paul's boots across the Appalachian Trail? All 2,190 miles relay style. And during that process, we learned from the hiking community that you never quit on a bad day. When things go haywire, you just keep going, you regain your composure, you keep walking. And that has been like a mantra for us over the last few years because there have been some bad days where we weren't sure how we'd make the Diaries work. But an amazing thing has happened. We asked for your help. Could you support the show? Could you keep it going for the next generation of people out there chasing dreams? And many of you did by becoming Diaries Plus members. Across all our platforms, we have 100,000 subscribers. Right now, there are a little more than 1% of you that have stepped up and said, I care about this project. I will power it. It's meant something to me. But what could we do if that number went to 3%? Or to 5%? What kind of stories could we tell? What kind of work could we do inside of our community? Could we do more Paul's Boots? Every time someone joins this global community, we think we can do more. We can give more. We can try harder because you are all behind us. And we know we can keep walking even when we have a bad day. So thank you. Please consider joining Diaries Plus. The link is in the show notes and on our website. We'll keep walking. So one of the questions I get asked all the time is who or what is inspiring you right now? And my answer is like they change pretty regularly to that question, but there is a complete through line. I think it's people who choose to grapple with the tensions or the difficult topics in their lives or communities, the things that sort of make them feel uneasy or that they worry about. Instead of just sitting there and worrying about it, they start to think, what can I do? They look at a complex issue, say like climate change, and instead of saying, I wish our society would do more about this, they start to act in their own way, on their own personal level. And invariably, someone will tell them, well, that doesn't make any difference. You're less than a drop of water in a bucket. But they keep on tinkering. And a lot of times, it produces really incredible things. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but that curiosity, that effort, that follow through, it's just so deeply human that it inspires me. And sometimes it's also just badass. In 2019, Stratton Matteson, an avid snowboarder, set an audacious goal. If he wanted to get to the mountains, he had to do it by bike. What started as a one-season challenge just kept going and going. Now, after 5 years, Stratton looks back at his experiment. On this edition of Good, Good, Bad, producer Skylar Perwin sits down with Stratton to get the highs and lows of human-powered adventure. I'm Fitz Cahall. You're listening to the Dirtbag Diaries.
My name is Stratton Matteson. I live in Bend, Oregon, and I'm a passionate splitboarder. And for 5.5 years, I only biked to snowboard 100% of the time, 100% human powered.
Can you give us an idea of what exactly it means when you say you're a passionate splitboarder? Like, how often did you get out there once you committed to this?
I was doing about 120 plus days a season, which was probably penciling out to somewhere like maybe around 150 days, like committed to the craft. If you include like days I was just biking, or camping, whatever, like on these missions.
That is a whole lot of days out in the cold. What exactly inspired you to embark on this quest?
I was inspired to delve into this journey because I wanted to be integral with my actions and the way I accessed the mountains. I had a realization that the climate crisis was intensifying, and it was becoming ever more clear to me that the thing that we love so much, snow and skiing in the mountains, was threatened by climate change. And I had some inner reflections and realized that I didn't want my pursuit of joy to be contributing to climate change and the degradation of our environment and our climate. I wanted to be an advocate for the change I wanted to see in the world, and wanted to find a way that I could be a snowboarder and a splitboarder, and I could try to do it in a more sustainable way. Because the way I was doing it did not feel like a sustainable way forward. I remember actually one of my friends saying it's impossible to be a snowboarder and be like an environmentalist and like care about the environment, because like you have to use a snowmobile, you have to do this, you have to do that. And the typical snowboarder path, or just, even recreational paths, typically includes a lot of motorized recreation to access those places, and is a pretty like resource intensive pursuit. That just felt super conflicting with the way I wanted to live my life. And so, I was connecting all those dots, and I thought, I want to see if you can be like an integral environmentalist and a snowboarder, and if those things can intertwine. And my girlfriend was really getting into bike commuting at that time. I started to get inspired by bike commuting and bike packing and bike touring. Also saw some other folks that went on some bike packing, bike to board style trips. And I just committed to myself that I was going to only bike to access all of my snowboarding for the whole winter.
So how did you take that inspiration and turn it into action? What did you do to get out on your first couple trips?
I got a gravel bike and a whole bike packing setup, and went on my first bike to board trip up into the glaciers here in the Cascade volcanoes. I remember I was working that day, finished up work, had the whole setup ready to go, and then like started pedaling off in like 90-degree weather and headed up the pass, got like worked in the sun, but then cruised up through the alpine wildflowers and up to the glaciers, and like had an awesome session. From there, me and my girlfriend actually went on this long bike tour from Oregon to New Mexico, went along the whole coastline and then across the desert, and then stayed in New Mexico visiting our family there, and did a bunch of biking to board in New Mexico around Taos and stuff. Once I got into that rhythm, I found that this was totally doable. Not only was I more aligned with my own morals and values, I was finding so much adventure and fulfillment and joy in this way of accessing the mountain. I mean, it's the same thing as when you go ski tour or splitboard up a mountain. There's a certain feeling you get when you put in the work and you climb the mountain and you put in every step to get there. And then the ride down is kind of means so much more to me, at least. So when you add biking there and you've climbed literally every foot of that mountain, there's just like this huge sense of fulfillment. And it's even more euphoric when it just feels like I feel really good about what I'm doing. There's not the negative attachment supporting like the fossil fuel industries and these systems that I believe a lot of us would probably rather not support. There's just this like extra sense of fulfillment and kind of bliss there. You can detach yourself from that.
I am curious about your lifestyle and how it was set up to enable you to do these things, because presumably it takes a little bit more time than the status quo. Was it difficult for you to build a lifestyle that enabled you to do this, or were you already pretty much there and it didn't need that much change?
You definitely need your lifestyle set up to delve fully into this approach like I did. But yeah, my lifestyle was already set up pretty well for it, because I have my own native plant landscaping and restoration business, and it's seasonal, so I do that in the summer months from like mid-April to November. Since I have my own business and I'm my own boss, yeah, I just work hard through the summer months and then I take the whole winter off. So that definitely gives me like a ton of freedom and time. That being said, though, because a common critique of like what I was trying to promote or what I like to promote was that like, oh, I need a snowmobile. I need this if I'm working 9 to 5 and I'm doing this or that. You know, this is not a very like reasonable thing for most people with real jobs and lives and stuff like that to work on, which I don't fully think is true. It's just a matter of what you value and how much time you have. You can put that towards whatever it may be. Now, and so that being said, like, I've done a lot of trips that were just, one day missions or stuff out my backyard, and you're going to have to sacrifice, I guess, a little more time on the mountain or whatever it may be. Like, yeah, you're going to get less skiing in. And just even me having my own free schedule throughout the winter, like I was quote unquote sacrificing how much riding I could do or how many different places I could go. I couldn't go as far, but part of that was diving deeper and connecting deeper with my local area, my local mountains. And we don't always have to go to the edge of the map necessarily to find adventure. Yeah, you might not be going to this exotic area, but the adventure is still there because now it's a huge adventure just to get to the mountain right out your back door. I think it can fit within any like time scale really. And obviously I was kind of doing that at like a pretty like dedicated level, but like, yeah, if you wanted to do 20 days a season of that, it would be a much smaller effort and commitment to getting out and doing it. But doing it at the level I was doing, which was just like, I pretty much like to full-time snowboard in the winter. It definitely was a full body, full like mental, spiritual pursuit doing it that much. I guess the way I was looking at it too, and the way I've looked at it is, it's like, do I want my recreation and adventure to negatively impact our climate, our ecosystems, and the people that directly live next to oil refineries and next to fossil fuel extraction sites? Because those people are getting affected on the daily beyond just our climate. There's people that live next to these refineries and stuff, and they have higher rates of cancer and all sorts of other diseases just from the pollution of living next to those. And I looked at it internally as, yeah, do I want to contribute to that? Or would I rather take that extra impact myself, which is like putting in the energy to get there in a human powered mode? And that's what I reasoned in my own head and my own internal process was I would rather take on that burden than put it on someone else.
Obviously, there's going to be a difference between like multi-day excursions when you're spending more time out in the mountains and you're maybe even biking from point to point and camping, and then the single-day adventures when you're just trying to go get a little bit of snowboarding in or ski a single line. But could you walk us through what a typical day of biking to go board might look like for you?
Some of the closest stuff, is going to take me at a minimum of 2 hours, but anywhere from like 2 to 5 hours to then get to the trailhead. So yeah, I might wake up at 2, get to the trailhead by 6 o'clock, whatever, climb up the mountain. And then if this was just a day trip, I biked all the way up there. So I want to make the use of my time. So then I'm probably riding or whatever till 5, 6 in the evening. And then like, I'm not home till like 10, 12. Like there's definitely a lot of days that are like 16, 18 hours of pretty much just like consistent movement. But that's why if I wanted to ride, like if I saw a window or I wanted to ride like multiple days in a row, like I'd pretty much always camp it because the day missions are definitely like pretty like huge and exhausting. Come spring, I could start to get more day missions in, but especially midwinter, the days are just so short that you just gotta get there and go camp. And then like if you're camped for 4 days, like the days in the middle are kind of more of a typical like ski tour day. When you get home, you're so like exhausted, but like that feeling of complete bliss and exhaustion, like that's the feeling. And you're definitely wrecked when you wake up the next day, but you also are just like so blissed out.
Speaking of blissed out, can you share like one of your most cherished moments or excursions from that time period and like what was so special about it?
One of my favorite trips was this tour I called Sierra to Baker, where I bike toured from south of Mammoth in the Sierra Nevada all the way to Mount Baker in northern Washington. And the vision for that trip was originally I wanted to bike and snowboard the whole Sierra Nevada range and then all the most prominent volcanoes in the Cascades in like one single journey. Yeah, it was a spectacular trip. I think it was like 110 days or 100 days or something like that. Kind of my goal with all of this was like at the root of it, it was I love snowboarding. I wasn't like trying to necessarily just like box check each peak and move on. It was kind of like I want to get as much riding as I can, but do it via bike. And I think there was like 50 days of riding on that trip or something, like 40 days of biking. It felt amazing. It was like you've just done one volcano and let's say you're on Rainier and you're looking back at Adams and you can look at the whole range and just see everywhere you just came from. And then you look to the north and you see everywhere you're going. And that's one thing I love about bike packing and traveling that way is that like you feel and you see like every mile, every foot of every hill. You're like totally immersed in the weather. You're at the mercy of whatever it may be. And sure, it's challenging, but it's also just deeply enriching and fulfilling. You get to smell all the different smells, like really notice the change of the seasons. Everything you eat is just so delicious because you're just like absolutely, starving. I just feel like everything is like pretty rich. And then one of the most special parts about that trip was one of my best friends, Alex Kohler. He joined me for all 5 of Washington's volcanoes, and we did those together. And he actually passed away 2 months after we did the trip. And he was one of my best friends. And so that's definitely one of the most memorable trips to me, just because it was honestly like the longest bike to board trip I've done with someone else. And it was just really special to get to share that with him. Like, especially not knowing that that'd be kind of like the last big mission we'd get to share together. You definitely have like the tough moments, but the thing I would always tell myself, and I always tell myself when I'm in those challenging times, is that usually it's just momentary, and the feeling when you come out on the other side of that challenge is just like one full of gratitude.
Riding your bike to go access the mountains for 5 years straight sounds, quite frankly, exhausting. And you've touched on that the exhaustion was all worth it because at the end of the day, it was immensely rewarding. But even so, were there moments where you just wanted to throw in the towel? And how did you keep that fire burning?
There weren't many moments that I wanted to throw in the towel until recently, until I decided I was ready to transition away from doing that 100% of the time. But I would say 99% of that whole 5-year period, we pretty much never had a thought of throwing in the towel. I was in it, and that was the reality I was in and I wanted to live, and it was just became my new normal. And I remember when I first started doing it, people were like, oh, you're going to sacrifice this, you're going to sacrifice that. But I always thought, I don't think I'm actually sacrificing anything. I'm actually gaining all this experience and all this, just this life experience that I wouldn't have gained if I didn't go on this pursuit. So I think that the pursuit was like fueling itself. The next mountain, the next line, the next range, whatever it is that kind of like piqued my interest as a rider was kind of the inspiration and the fuel for the journey it was going to take to get there. Definitely like an obsession. You can't stop thinking about it. But I would say sometimes after those big trips, and I think this is a common thing people feel after, big adventures, big life moments. Sometimes I would feel like a low after the trip, actually. And I don't think it was wishing I was still there. You've just been giving it your all for so long that when you remove yourself from that, you got this reintegration when you come back home to a different reality. And that can take a second to just get back in.
Yeah, looking back on that. What were some of the lowest moments of the whole endeavor, or what was one like really low moment that sticks out to you? Can you describe like what happened, where you were, and what it felt like?
For trailblazing rides or springtime rapids, Kuat Racks gets your gear where you want it to be. Kuat's Class 2 and Class 4 kayak racks are a J-style rack that easily mount to factory or aftermarket bars. Their latest Class 4 rack gives you the flexibility to have the rack up when you're hauling your kayaks, but then fold it down when you're not. Think about all those parking garages. So scary. Plus, it locks in place quickly when you're ready to hit the river. The co-molded rubber and protected cam buckles securely haul your boat wherever you need to go. Big high fives to Kuat for supporting the show. Seriously, you make it possible. Kuat, because you love your kayak. Everybody hikes. I mean, period. No matter what sport you're doing out there, whether you're running, whether you're backpacking, whether you're getting to a crag, you hike. You hike to get there. And that's what connects us and unifies us all. And that is pretty rad. Who hasn't had a great day of connecting with a friend, a fellow family member, even a stranger through time on the trail? Oboz footwear knows nothing in the world unifies the human-nature connection more than the shared love of hiking. They create footwear that delivers unmatched fit, unrivaled feel, and exceptional performance for all kinds of hikes. They give you the tools you need to get out there and really love hiking. Since 2007, Oboz has planted trees for shoes sold. And as a certified B Corp, Oboz balances profit with their impact on the planet and the people that their brand touches. To find your next pair of footwear, check out obozfootwear.com/lovehiking. And thanks so much for supporting the show. You're making inspiration for people's next hike possible. I like to think I'm dialed, and then I forget the sunscreen. Seriously, I'll have every other piece of gear I need, and then I'll get blasted by the sun. And even when I do, when I'm out in the mountains, I often sweat it off, and I end up coming home kind of rocked. So when Turns, a skincare company, approached me, I was intrigued. I'm not like really a put things on your face kind of person, apparently, but they were telling me about Mayday, a product that helps your skin recover when you get a little too much sun. And mostly I dug the story because Turns is led by Eduardo, who's a chemical discoverer. And that means like finding compounds in nature that might work to create better products. Eduardo was also a lifelong surfer, diver, and fisherman, so he knew what it was like to be out in the sun. So with Turns, he combined two of his life's passions and is creating products made with natural ingredients derived from the ocean. In this case, kelp. Turns is made in the US, it's vegan and cruelty-free. After sun should not be an afterthought, especially for me. Use the code DIRTBAG to get 25% off your first order at turns.com. Turns, like the bird. We'll put a link in the show notes, and you can try out Turns for yourself.
Actually, slightly tough one because there isn't, I don't know if there's like a standout low moment. I definitely have random ones sprinkled throughout my journeys. I feel like sometimes I almost forget about those things. But when I was on that Sierra to Baker trip, I had just ridden through the Sierras and I was getting up to Mount Shasta and it was looking awful. Like the locals were saying it was the worst snow year and like the worst condition they've seen the mountain in ever. It was just like completely windswept. There's barely like one clean skiable route to the top that wasn't just completely beat up. But I was on this trip and part of my goal with the trip was to climb and ride all the volcanoes and stuff. So I was like, I'm here, I'm just gonna do it anyways. And yeah, we went up there and like we were looking with our binos and stuff and we thought we had kind of like isolated out what looked like the smoothest snow we could ride that was left. And we get up there and it's literally like 2-foot tall penitentes, which a lot of people probably don't know what penitentes are. And I'm glad you don't know what they are, but they're literally these cone-like giant sun cups in the snow that are like daggers essentially. And like, they're almost unrideable. And that was the best snow we found there. And at this exact same time, my knee, which I had a previous injury on a while ago, started acting up on the trip. It just got super swollen and sore and was like pretty like unusable almost at that time. I was like limping around and stuff. And so I had to stop and take, I don't know, like 5 days off, like a pretty like substantial chunk to just let it completely rest up and heal. And then at the exact same time, I also got like a weird stomach bug. So I was trying to like power through and make it through all that. And it definitely was a little bit of a struggle. And then the other thing, I guess, when you're like touring around like that is like sometimes if you have those kind of issues, you have to just have like these down days in some random town. And I guess it's like, it's an opening to see what's there and like meet people there. But at the same time, like when you're just hanging out in some random town, you don't know anyone and you're like sick and your knees messed up, that can be like definitely a bummer. It was still not that bad. I don't know. I feel like it could get a lot worse. So it wasn't that bad. And then it's kind of weirdly fun at the same time, you know, type 3 type stuff.
Yeah, definitely type 3.
Yeah.
With trips like that Sierra to Baker excursion, in the midst of this 5-year, like big trips like that, and then obviously the day-to-day of trying to get out by bike, it's a huge departure from the status quo of skiing. It feeds your lifestyle, but also very much drives a alternative lifestyle. How did your friends and family and like snow partners feel about this objective?
I think they all saw the reasons and they all realized like why I was doing it, and pretty much all of them backed it. I would say most of the feedback was really positive. And when I was lucky, I had friends that wanted to join me and would come do it too. And I mean, at the same time, it was maybe like an annoyance to them too, because it was just different. It was just challenging because sometimes I would just be going and meeting up with friends there. So it's like, really, what's the difference? But at the same time, I wanted to see this through and wanted to see like what was possible and try to build like momentum for just like alternatives. So sometimes it was challenging and it seems like almost pointless, you know, when it's like, all right, your friend's just going to meet you there at the trailhead. Like, why don't you just get a ride with them or whatever? But your friend's not going to bike with you to the trailhead unless you do it too. So someone's just got to do something and something's got to give. The hardest part was like not, you know, having people to join me all the time and stuff. I mean, I think if I did, that would make it even better and make it easier. I think that's probably the harder part, is like doing it alone. I met a lot of new friends and different people through it too. When you're out traveling via bike like that, like you're exposed to all these random interactions. And I feel like so many people want to help you too. And so there's a lot of relationships that I came into through that pursuit. And then, yeah, it was definitely challenging on my relationship too with my partner, but she totally gets it and supports it and loves it and loved it. So I fully had her support. But yeah, snowboarding 120 plus days a year and then doing it by bike just means like so many days of the year I'm gone. And especially when you are, let's say you're actually only 20 miles from home, but you're having to camp out there, it can be challenging because it's like you're so close. The reality of only getting there by bike, it makes it so it's actually I'm a day away or a couple days away, whatever.
How did it finally end?
Yeah, like I said, when I was fully in it, I barely had any thoughts of wanting to throw in the towel or quit. But then during the last year of it, I had 1 or 2 moments where I think just the compounding effect of it and the challenges did like start to weigh on me a bit. And then this fall, as I was just amongst it, keep in mind I was all summer too, pretty much like my whole business mostly is all via bike. And then whenever I was recreating in the summer too, I was just like biking up to go backpacking, climbing, hiking, whatever. I think the combination of being away from home so much and then sometimes the struggle of the cold, doing in the cold is definitely like straining. Like your hands can be just like completely bricked and frozen. And I also felt like, okay, I've done this for 5 years. Like I've definitely seen this through. I definitely know this is something I can totally do. And I'm also really glad I stepped away from, the systems and cycles I didn't want to support like right then. And that was the nice thing about biking to board was that like it kind of just allowed me to take direct action like pretty easily. It felt like sure, it's a huge pursuit, but it was also pretty easy to just like get a bike. Like that's not that expensive and just start doing it. But yeah, I think I realized I wanted more time to put energy into other things in my life as well. And definitely is a huge time demand because I mean, it takes you twice as much time probably overall to do the same thing. And so I wanted to see if there was a way I could continue the pursuit. So I started to see, what other options were out there. After not spending any money on vehicles or anything for 5 years, I was able to save up some money and, I was starting to think about maybe getting an electric vehicle, doing that. And so I definitely put in a lot of research and time looking into if that was a good option and if I felt okay about that option. I mean, it's not perfect and everything has its negative impacts, unfortunately, like everything kind of industrial and mechanical, but that felt like one of my better options. And so, yeah, eventually this past early winter, I bought an EV and so I'm doing that now.
Nice. Would you do those 5 years again?
Oh, definitely. 100%. Yeah. I mean, even when I was considering whether to buy an EV and shift away from this 100% commitment to like human powered access, I was like, I think I could do this for another 5 years. I could do 10 years. But ultimately, I just decided I was ready for a transition. And I've only been doing this new thing for a handful of months. And so I'm just kind of allowing my own inspiration to just follow my own inspiration. And that could definitely mean like some more big bike expeditions in the future and stuff. But I think it's nice to have a little time to like look back and like let that experience settle a little bit. But I'm still very committed to trying to access the mountains and go snowboarding in like the most sustainable way I can, just because I think in a lot of facets of our lives, we need to have more intention with the impacts on our planet and the environments around us. And like, we're not going to have a more sustainable and like regenerative society unless we all start thinking like that a little bit. It doesn't have to be like massive. It doesn't have to be, I'm not going to use a car at all to go snowboarding. But I think just like shifting our minds and having more intention and realizing our impacts, analyzing those is important to create a more sustainable society.
You've spent a lot of time now seeing the outdoors throughout the seasons in a very close and intimate way. Have you personally had the experience of seeing things change over time? I mean, whether that's within the 5-year period that you were just biking to access the mountains or within your entire time spent in the mountains from being young till now.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed some dramatic changes. Some of these places you could snowboard through this glacier and now it's 100-foot cliff that's completely melted and the glacier is like completely separated. And now the glacier is 2 chunks and you don't have the upper accumulation zone feeding the lower zones. And eventually that's just going to be a dead glacier. But then on top of that, huge increase in wildfires and drought. It was somewhere when I started the full bike to board pursuit, we had like the worst wildfire smoke and the most acres burned in the Pacific Northwest. There was a full week in the fall where it was like hazardous air quality. It was like 500 on the AQI scale. You literally just couldn't go outside for a week straight. In our region, those are like some of the most severe impacts is drought and like wildfire and then loss of glaciers. And those are all things I'd rather try to limit. Through biking to board and my like media I create from splitboarding and stuff, I would just like to promote and see more intentionality and respect and reciprocity and like accessing the mountains and stuff. I feel like so much of the mainstream ski media is like a pretty extractive paradigm and it almost glorifies heavy machinery and it kind of puts the pinnacle of the sport as like going in heli skiing or something. It might be a great little dream we're living in right now, but the fact of the matter is I kind of doubt that's going to be something that people 100 years from now are going to be able to do. And I'd rather start to see the culture shift and think about the future. I just would like to see the ski industry and the outdoor world live the reality that is one that like people can live for many generations.
Thanks, Stratton, for sharing your story and the inspiration. It's greatly appreciated. Today's episode was edited and produced by Skylar Perwins with additional help from Becca Cahal, who's our executive producer. Our stories come from friends of friends, and from you, our community. If you have an idea for a story, please give us a shout. You can find all the information on our website, dirtbagdiaries.com. Today's music was from Brendan O'Connell. Our theme song was from Jacob Bain and Nice Kodo. I'm Fitz Cahal. Thanks for listening. Welcome to And Then What, the segment where we break down the headlines and figure out what the hell's happened since then. So often these days, we get to the headline, the big, bad, scary thing, but we never follow up or hear about how we can help or why this happened, because the rest of the world has already moved on. We were sitting around talking, and we thought, wouldn't it be nice if that existed? And then we realized that the someone who would probably make that happen was us. Simply put, we're going to chase down headlines once a month from the outdoor world that caught all of our attention, and then bring in an expert to break it down and find out what's happened since then. In the end, we hope we can give you a way to act. Thanks to our Diaries Plus members who are making this kind of work possible, not just for them, but for all of us. Thank you. So today we're going to dive into the Valentine's Day Massacre with Tanya Lown Hecht, VP of Strategy and Communications for the Outdoor Alliance, which represents climbers, skiers, mountain bikers, kayakers, and slews of passionate outdoor people in Washington, D.C. They've been pivotal in supporting public lands at the federal level. Tanya, I think a lot of us have come to know it as Valentine's Day Massacre. In February, as part of the DOGE initiative, the Trump administration laid off 2,300 Department of Interior employees, which included Park Service and Bureau of Land Management. The Forest Service lost 3,400 positions, almost 10% of its workforce. That was after the fork in the road emails, which gave people the option to kind of leave quietly. What has happened since those initial headlines?
I mean, it's been a pretty wild time. So basically, since that time, there has been a lot of blowback on the administration, and courts halted a bunch of the layoffs. But from what we can gather, about 10% was laid off. A lot of that was in recreation, maybe half of those folks. So people who maintain campgrounds, trail maintenance, the folks that are working at the booths, seasonal workers, backcountry rangers, search and rescue. You're talking about the people who process your permit, and a lot of folks that do fire stuff, folks who are hired through a special hiring process like veterans. They got rid of all those folks. So all across the board. What happened after that is like several courts determined that it was not legal, the way that the administration went after these layoffs. And they temporarily reinstated many of these workers, not all of them, but many of them were temporarily reinstated. A lot of those workers were immediately put on administrative leave. So it's not like folks are really back. The fact of the matter is the administration has not changed its position on wanting to reduce the workforce. And now it's pursuing this reduction in force, the RIF, where they've told the agencies you have to reduce payroll by 30%. Those plans for reduction in force were due to the administration in mid-March, and they're supposed to be enacted by mid-April. So there are plans for deeper cuts. There's been some good news, right? Like at the Park Service, for example, they've authorized 6,000 or 7,000 seasonal workers to come back. A bunch of Republican members actually went to the administration and said, like, hey, I have a park in my district. This is really important. Please make sure we can hire folks back. So they're trying to like get those folks back on board. But at the BLM, at the Forest Service, and also at the Park Service, they're still planning to lay off a lot of folks.
Public lands are one of the most reliably nonpartisan issues out there. What impact did the public outcry, did people calling their representatives, calling their elected officials have on reversing the course on some of these firings?
People's voices mattered a lot. We've been in DC all week with all of our executive directors and going around meeting with offices, meeting with the administration. And the thing we've heard repeatedly is how much the administration and members are really listening to what people are saying and listening to what narratives are being told about what's happening. They're looking at the press stories. They're looking at people's quotes. They're looking at constituents who are calling them and telling them stories, both to understand what's happening and to really figure out like what their next steps are. And I think the most important thing that the outdoor community is doing is reaching out and sharing really specifically what's going on and what the negative effects are. So if you know of negative effects that are happening or are going to happen on your national forest or a park near you, BLM land, if you work for the agencies or you did work for the agencies and you really understand what are the consequences, your voices are particularly important because articulating those consequences for what's happening makes it real for a lot of folks who are just like bureaucrats in DC who are like, yeah, let's just like cut the payroll, and they don't understand what is going to happen. And articulating those consequences is what is helping to move the needle in terms of getting folks rehired, stopping them from the kind of indiscriminate and chaotic cuts that were happening. The other thing is the administration really still has to care what Congress thinks, especially what Republican members think. And so if you have a Republican member of Congress, or even if your Republican member of Congress doesn't seem to care or be doing anything, hearing from you like makes a difference for them. It's not a waste of time. Keep doing it. There's not a ton of Republicans standing up saying vocally don't do this, but we heard a lot about members going to the administration privately, speaking to them about public lands, about funding, about staffing. So it's definitely working. It sounds like discouraging to say this, but things are bad right now, but they're definitely going to get worse in the coming months. But I think core priorities is focus on what's irreversible. We got to keep public lands public. We put the line in the sand and make sure that irreversible stuff, losing big swaths of public lands, doesn't happen. That's not something that anyone wants. 80% of Americans are highly supportive of public lands, keeping public lands in public hands. We're hearing lots of different things about how serious members of Congress are about some privatization, some sell-offs, some selling things off for housing, to pay for tax cuts for people who are in the top 1%. A lot of these conversations that are happening about public lands right now are seeing public lands as something that you could use to raise funds to pay for things in the government. And like there's a bunch of articles this week where they're discussing whether they'd include public lands as an offset to pay for tax cuts and spending.
So do we have the ability right now to maybe prevent that? Like instead of like having to respond once it's happened, is there ability if we raise our voices right now and say this stuff matters to us, it matters to our communities, is there a chance to actually stop it from ever happening?
Yes, absolutely. And that's when we have to do it. I mean, once they start selling these places off, you're not getting them back. So the time to act is now. The time is when lawmakers are walking around with this idea in their head. You say like, no, that's a bad idea. Don't do that under any circumstances. That is like the end of the line. Not to like toot our own horn too much, but Outdoor Alliance is a great organization to follow because we follow these issues really closely. We try to build out opportunities for people to take action when it's really meaningful, when it's relevant, when your voices are going to make a difference. We're trying not to blast people about everything, but about the really important stuff. We have this amazing tool that makes it really easy to write your members of Congress. I don't know if you've used it, Fitz, but it's like
I have.
You put in your address, so it will pull up who your members are. And there's a template message. You can like adjust it, make it personal and send it. It takes a minute or two. And that stuff really, really, really matters. Like it matters a lot more than you think. We've been going to offices all week and everyone is talking about how much they're hearing from their members, getting hundreds of letters on it. We're really stressed about it. Like that outreach is really working. Congress needs to hear that constituents are losing their mind about the thought that we might sell off public lands or that we're going to gut the agencies. This is a truly a bipartisan issue. And those positions aren't always reflected by elected officials. So it's important that folks with Republican members, folks that are Republicans themselves, like reach out and say, hey, you know, I'm on board with all these other things. This is a red line issue for me. I want to see public lands stay public. If we raise our voices, we're really noisy, there's a big ruckus, it's not going to happen, and we're going to protect it, and it's going to go away. And it's going to be a lot easier to do it now than once the ball starts rolling down the hill.
So one of the things we wanted to do with this series is, we're diving in deeper to the headlines, but we also want to give everyone out there a way that they can participate, because I think that the reality is that we feel better when we can actually take action. One of the questions we've been fielding constantly is, how do I stay up to date on what's happening? You know, a lot of times we get this first headline and then we never hear what happens afterwards. What Tanya and OA are doing that's incredible is that they've built an email list that basically provides action alerts. So the moment something like the public firings happens, or earlier in April, there was actually a great instance where there was a chance to actually take public lands off the negotiating table for the budget in the Senate, and came very close to getting Republicans and Democrats to come together to stop that being part of the process. All that happens is because you can sign up for OA's action alert. I know it seems strange to be like, ask for another email, but like that's literally what we're hearing from people, is that they're like, I didn't know this was happening. I signed on to social media too late. This is the way you stay in the know. So go ahead, get signed up. The link is in the show notes. We'll have more updates for you in the future. Thanks for listening.